All right, let's go. The Eagles are in Dallas to try to do something they haven't done in 7 years. And I'd say the signs are promising based on the injury report. Although on that topic, Sirianni's exchange regarding Jalen Hurts' ankle injury was bizarre. However, let's talk about how the Birds can exploit some of the biggest weaknesses from Dallas, what the odds are of shutting down CeeDee Lamb, and why Philly's about to unleash the pass rush. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? It's Dallas week, and it's time for the Eagles to get the first win since 2017 in Dallas.
It's been a long time coming, huh?
Yeah, it definitely is. In fact, the Eagles have only held it to a one-possession game once on the road against the Cowboys in the last 5 years, as they've lost the last 5 contests by an average margin of nearly 19 points per game. Sorry, I know you probably didn't need that reminder. Now sure, Philly's had some injuries in some of those meetings, yet with Dak Prescott out multiple weeks due to a hamstring injury, it feels like anything short of covering the 7.5-point spread would be a letdown. But okay, you're right. Honestly, let's just get a win with the guys staying healthy and move on. Also, speaking of that win, congratulations to Takeem Perry, aka GSMG Tack, for winning the signed Saquon Barkley helmet giveaway during the Friday night live stream. All I needed to do, man, is hit me up on one of the socials, or my email also works, and then make sure to verify that it's you along with some other information so I can get the helmet shipped out to you. Of course, thank you to everybody, but this would not be possible without the sponsor of the channel, Underdog. Because not only did they help me give away the Saquon helmet, but they're also giving out all new customers a free CJ Stroud pick for Sunday Night Football. When, of course, you scan the QR code and use my code PHILLYSPECIAL at sign up. Oh yeah, you'll also get up to $1,000 bonus cash when you use my link. Now here's the good news. Despite Underdog not offering the pick'em options in Philly, they do allow you to play in Dallas. So if you're headed to the game, then take advantage of their insane discounts to win big with the Eagles on Sunday. And we were so close to hitting the parlay last week until, obviously, AJ got injured. But this week, I'm taking Saquon Barkley over 87.5 rushing yards, Zack Baun over 8.5 tackles and assists, and Brandon Aubrey over 1.5 field goals made. As always, feel free to tell those picks and then swing by for the stream so we can sweat out the picks together. See if we can get a Trevor Lawrence interception while you mention your buddy. Maybe jinx it. Trevor Lawrence over the middle, complete. It's picked off! He did it! We called it! Zack Baun! Did he catch it? He caught it! The streams have gotten pretty wild lately. But you know what else is wild? The fact that Underdog is offering a Will Shipley anytime touchdown as a 19 times multiplier. I mean, sure, he doesn't see the field much, but considering that this game could very easily turn into a blowout, and Dallas is the worst against the run, it's not the worst to add to your picks. I'm just saying, if you want to join the best option in fantasy sports, then scan the QR code, use my code PHILLYSPECIAL, or just click the link in the description and use my code PHILLYSPECIAL where you can get up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Look, I don't know how the Eagles don't assert their dominance in the ground game, because Dallas literally ranks dead last in all defensive categories like rushing red zone, rushing inside the tackles, rushing under center, design the runs, and overall rushing efficiency. I mean, honestly, it's no surprise seeing backs like Derrick Henry, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Bijan Robinson put up some really good numbers against that unit. Heck, even Dallas's own have admitted to getting bullied on run D, particularly in the interior of their defensive line. And when you consider the fact that A.J. Brown is back in the lineup along with Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith, the Birds' offense should be able to move the football at will. Also, on the topic of injuries, it's pretty crazy to have a team this healthy at this point in the season. In fact, even linebacker, fullback, hybrid, do-it-all special teamer Ben VanSumeren was cleared from concussion protocol, so not nearly the concern, meaning the offense will be at full strength and shouldn't have any setbacks. Plus, considering the impact that BVS has had on the ground game, combined with the fact that Dallas has been absolutely atrocious at stopping the run, Philly is in for a big day.
Uh-oh. We're driving across the country. The last thing we need is bad luck.
Sorry, I'm not trying to jinx it. I'm just saying, when you look around the rest of the division and see Marshon Lattimore out with a hamstring injury, all the Dallas struggles, and even New York battling a couple key players missing, it makes you appreciate where the Eagles are at. By the way, yes, I realize Jordan Mailata is still on the IR. But the storyline from Friday that got a little bit blown out of proportion was Nick Sirianni's bizarre response to the recent Jalen Hurts ankle injury speculation.
I haven't really seen Jalen be held back for load management before. What was behind that on Wednesday?
Yeah, he's dealing with it was on the injury report, dealing with the ankle, and just making sure we're precautious with everything.
Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way.
What's wrong with the ankle? He wasn't on the ankle.
I'm sorry, Jalen Hurts. It was an ankle?
What's that?
It was the rest.
That was the rest, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem.
I thought you were talking about something else. All right.
It wasn't me. They're trying to make me an scapegoat.
Is Jalen dealing with an ankle problem?
Now rest.
God, that's my phone.
I didn't hear a phone.
To be continued.
Okay, the part where that could become a very minor problem is that the Eagles did not disclose that injury, meaning technically, based on NFL rules, the league could choose to penalize the Birds or hit him with a low-grade fine. Yet at the end of the day, QB1's been playing his best ball of the season, so it's not like the ankles affected him that much. And I agree with Zach Berman, who added that it's entirely conceivable that the Eagles were just giving Hurts time to rest ankle soreness and that injury didn't rise to a level of an injury designation. Now, of course, the counter-argument to that is that Jalen has hardly ever gotten an actual legit rest day. But ultimately, I'm sure it just comes down to a minor accounting error from the PR team that is very easily fixable. On a serious note, I don't think that it's that big of a deal. It's just one other little minor thing to throw into Nick Sirianni being in front of the media.
Every time he opened his mouth, we'd piss ourselves laughing.
Look, be that as it may, it's not near as bad as Jerry Jones talking to the media and all the stuff that he says. Remember, this is a guy who said they'd be all in and failed to make a meaningful move until right before the trade deadline, as Dallas ended up giving away a 4th-round pick for Carolina's Jonathan Mingo, despite, probably being without Dak Prescott for the rest of the season. Anyway, when it comes to matchups and areas to take advantage of, look no further than how poorly the Dallas interior D-line has been. Which, yes, I mentioned earlier, but it's almost impressive at how much of a disappointment Dallas's former first-round pick in Mozzie Smith has been this season. And shout out to Jimmy Kempski, but if you want to get an idea for how it's going to go on Sunday, then there you go. But on the flip side, the Birds are going to have their hands full with Micah Parsons, as he's officially listed as questionable, but most reporters in the know are suggesting that he's playing. Regardless, here's one thing that we do know. Dallas is for sure going to try to make sure that Micah Parsons is absolutely not lined up against Pave the Lane. I mean, come on, Lane Johnson has absolutely owned Micah whenever they go head-to-head. However, Parsons has been able to find some success lined up against others, and seeing as though Jordan Mailata is still on the IR with his injury, wouldn't surprise me to see Dallas try to exploit Fred Johnson. Like, I don't blame him, because he's definitely been up and down, although Brian Baldinger's believing Fred will be up to the task.
He was on the edge right here against an elite rusher, a guy that had 17.5 sacks last year. You watch him here now. Like, watch the hands. It's all hand fighting inside. Hand-to-hand combat. Watch him get that left hand inside. All right? Get that thumb turned up and lock out that elbow. Like, very, very consistent. Like, watch his short set. Bam. Stone him at the line. Look at Josh trying to get those hands knocked off him. Can't do it. Now run him. Ball comes out. Nice. All right, here we go. 2nd and 22. This is a pass rusher's dream right here. Let's see what he does. Inside shoulder right here is in good shape. Now run him. Stay between the man and the quarterback. Big shot down the field to A.J. Brown. Nice. All right, now you get Josh trying a move on him. A little cross chop. All right, trying to chop that hand down. Okay, now how do you recover from that? Keep moving the feet. Move the feet. Well done. Like, this is, like, not many teams can function with an offense with a backup left tackle and at times a backup right guard. It's a credit to Stoutland. But Fred Johnson is playing as good at left tackle as as half the starters in this league.
All right, this is kind of a given at this point, but kudos to Jeff Stoutland, especially for what he's getting from the offensive line this season. Unfortunately for the Cowboys, they're in a much worse situation, because for one, they're the most pass-happy team in the NFL, as they throw the ball a little over 66% of the time. Plus, when you look at Terrence Steele at right tackle, he's a huge liability, as he's already given up 6 sacks this season. And remember, this is the same dude who gave up 4 sacks to Philly last season. Then at the other tackle, you have Tyler Guyton, who's a rookie and still trying to figure things out. Oh yeah, he's also got 12 penalties on the year. Also, Cooper Beebe has been moved to center, but never actually played there in college. Granted, he's getting a little bit better. And then Zach Martin didn't practice at all this week, but he's for sure playing. Yet at 34 in just a few weeks, he's not nearly the same player he used to be. Which leaves Tyler Smith, who, like Jimmy Kempski said, is the only guy the Cowboys can really feel good about both in the short term and long term, but is playing arguably the least important position on the line. Seriously, besides him and CeeDee Lamb, I don't know how Dallas is going to hang around. Okay, you're right. There's one other area that could make this game a whole lot closer than it needs to be, and that's special teams. Because the Cowboys are 25th in offense and 29th in defense. However, when it comes to their special teams, they're the second best unit in the league. Reminder, that's why I took Brandon Aubrey to make 2 field goals in this game. I mean, he's practically in range as soon as he steps on the field. Anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts on that, and also take a quick second here. Take a second and think about this. Who is the first touchdown scorer in the game? It could be an Eagles player, heck, you could say a Dallas player, but who's the first touchdown scorer in the game? Because shout out to Underdog for another giveaway, but if you get it right and the Eagles win, then Underdog is going to give out any NFL jersey of your choice, which I will draw for at the end of the game on my live stream. So good luck to you. Also, I figured since it had been a while, and after all, it's Dallas week, why not catch up with NFL analyst Anthony DeBona to get his thoughts on what to expect between the NFC East rivals and everything else around the Birds. The injury report with the Eagles, Jalen Hurts was resting. Then it turns out Sirianni, what he says in the press conference, is it an ankle injury for Jalen Hurts? Is it not? Is it that big of a deal? Curious what you make of the whole I don't know if we call it drama and Jalen Hurts ankle, non-ankle issue.
It's a whole weird situation because usually Nick Sirianni's like plays it super close to the vest and he doesn't really say anything about injuries, and that's kind of what we've become like accustomed to seeing because he's usually like, oh, you guys will hear about that in the afternoon or whatever. But then he kind of unintentionally or whatever, he gave out a little bit too much information in regards to Jalen Hurts' ankle, and I kind of got killed on it for tweeting about it because I was saying how now that's kind of the topic in Philadelphia because he kind of, I guess you could say he kind of screwed up and let that information out because otherwise nobody would have even known about this whole ankle situation and what was going on because it's not like it was a reported injury beforehand or anything like that. It was just people were like, oh, he's playing really well. He's moving really well. And nobody had any questions about his ankle. And now all of a sudden it's a topic of discussion, even though he had a full practice and appears perfectly fine for week 10. But I was just talking about more so in terms of how it can move going forward and be like a narrative that's if he all of a sudden does struggle, now people are like, oh, is it the ankle or how long were they hiding this for or whatever. So overall, I think he'll be perfectly fine and things seem to be moving in the right direction. But Nick Sirianni kind of botched that one.
Yeah, it seems to be the continual, common denominator, right? Because it's like at the end of the day, even as you said, it's not that big of a deal when it comes to, okay, Jalen, minor injury. Tim McMahon is saying, yes, there is something confirmed, league sources, but it's like, okay, well, whatever. But the fact that it's Sirianni again publicly with just something, right? So then there's the thought process along those lines. But hey, at least the Eagles and the momentum has been trending in the right direction and they're winning. Are there any significant ramifications? I saw people saying like, oh, what does that mean? The fact that you should report based on injuries, but just enlighten everybody, I guess, as far as ramifications of not maybe reporting a potential injury for Jalen Hurts there.
Well, given the whole Joel Embiid situation in Philadelphia, of course, people in the city are going to be a little scared about this whole injury situation.
Yeah.
Either not being confirmed or not being investigated. And I mean, I tweeted that I think maybe the NFL might look into it. Maybe they won't. But given that the 49ers weren't punished for what happened with Christian McCaffrey to start the season, where he was listed as questionable or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden he was like, nope, he's out for basically half the season. So if they didn't get punished, I don't think anything will really come of it. But I wouldn't be surprised if they say that the NFL is going to look into it or do some type of investigation regarding Sirianni's comments.
And we've seen this before, at least from Philly's side, not of the same stance, but like, the Saquon, was there tampering, was there, non-tampering, James Franklin's comments, going way back to whenever that happened, all that. So hopefully there's nothing, as you say, it's a good precedent potentially that was set or not set with Christian McCaffrey. So we'll see. At the end of the day, could you get a small fine? Possibly. But yeah, not anything major of that side. Now, when it comes to, and talking about major, because we have people going back to, we're a little bit less than a week post trade deadline, but the thought was like, okay, will the Eagles make some moves? Is there going to be some extra players in here? Are we going to see any other acquisitions? Howie Roseman and the Eagles obviously chose not to do that, and we had a number of recordings, live streams, and also videos of just like, hey, here's potential targets. You had several targets also that you mentioned in a couple different articles. So the thought was, maybe it's not a blockbuster type of move, but still, you could add some sort of depth there and, bolster the squad, especially when it came to pass rush. We didn't see that, obviously, so it kind of tells you about the team, and we had heard previously of Vic Fangio. But takeaways from that, obviously, kind of first time publicly recording since that, but takeaways, what it tells you about the Eagles, any concerns there, but also just long-term planning, for this season of not making a move at the deadline.
It wasn't too big of a surprise. I mean, given Howie Roseman's recent history of it was 3 years in a row that he kind of made a move around the trade deadline. So I guess people expected it. And like I said, we talked about 10 to 20 candidates, it felt like, that were kind of the targets for the Eagles that made sense. But at the same time, given how well he has constructed the roster, going back to free agency and the draft, he's kind of put the Eagles in a situation where they didn't have to make a move because they have depth at a lot of these positions. Because even the positions we were talking about, whether it was tight end or, like you said, on the edge, they have players when they are fully healthy that they can kind of roll through and see what they have. So now it seems like they didn't make a move on the edge, but now Nick Sirianni is talking about possibly Jalyx Hunt getting more time. So maybe they kind of think of him as like he almost redshirted for the first half of the season, where now they can kind of unleash him. And I don't think he's going to play a huge role, but if he does see a kind of an uptick in snaps, that'll kind of benefit them and give them a different look for the second half of the season and potentially the playoffs.
do we feel like, you say, Jalyx Hunt maybe not playing a ton of snaps, but is there a potential you see Jalyx Hunt of maybe as the season goes on, not obviously like in a week or two, but like as the season goes on, could he, I'm not necessarily say a difference maker, but like, I don't know, is there a chance, I guess, where he could play some sort of meaningful role when it comes to the pass rush? Do you see that as a possibility, knowing what Fangio thinks about him? Or, when Sirianni alludes to the fact or kind of referencing, we'll see him maybe a little bit more. How far do you think that actually goes with a guy like Jalyx Hunt?
Well, if you look back at last season, they kind of took a similar approach with Nolan Smith, where he was just primarily like a special teams player for most of the season. And then later on in the year, you kind of saw him get a little bit of a role and kind of maximize those snaps that he did get, where he was just basically playing with more effort than other guys and trying harder. And a guy like Jalyx Hunt, even during preseason, we saw that he was just like, whenever he was in, he was going 110%. He looked great in terms of his versatility, being able to kind of drop in coverage with that safety experience and do things that the other edge rushers just simply can't do because of his athleticism and experience. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of, I'm not saying he's going to become a starter or play 25 plus snaps, but situationally, I think he could play anywhere from like 5 to 15 snaps. That wouldn't surprise me at all, where he kind of takes over as maybe the fourth edge if they want to kind of drop Bryce Huff out of that rotation, or if they want to utilize Brandon Graham more along the interior, and that kind of frees up a little bit more snaps on the edge. I think Jalyx Hunt and just the skill set that he has is almost too good to kind of hold for a whole year on the bench.
I totally agree. And by the way, if people are not following, is Anthony DeBona at DeBona NFL, NFL analyst and covering the NFL as well as Eagles stuff, gutting it out here. This is your MJ performance. We appreciate you not at your best, but still showing up, doing your best, playing more than 6 snaps. I'm sorry, that's probably a little bit too much shade for Bryce Huff, but he only played 6 snaps, and that was kind of weird, the whole way that transpired of, again, back before the trade deadline, but rumors of like, could Bryce Huff be traded? Strange he only gets 6 snaps at all, but then he played, so it's like, well, if you were going to, like, would you have played him at all? Just odd, right? Like the fact that he only gets 6 snaps there. We'd seen some progression, but it's in an interesting place because you're also like, well, if you read the tea leaves, it doesn't seem to suggest that there's as much belief. We're not saying there's none, but there's as much belief from Vic Fangio there. So I'm curious, when it comes to Jalyx Hunt and others for the pass rush, do we continue to see a decline, or is this kind of a one-off instance as Bryce Huff continues to get healthier? Will he play, the standard, I guess, amount of snaps? I don't know. We've seen a lot of guys producing, but Bryce Huff is one of those, even though the defense as a whole has been good, probably more of a letdown, I suppose, at this point. But nonetheless, the defense has lived up to expectations so far. As you get into a more difficult part of your schedule, it'll be interesting. Can they continue to answer the call, or do they, I do not say regress or fall off a cliff, but do they come back a little bit toward the mean, so to speak? I don't know. I'm curious. I'm curious to see how that actually affects them.
Well, the situation with Bryce Huff is interesting because it felt like he kind of was like catching his stride and playing well. And he even had a pressure early on against the Bengals, but then apparently he's dealing with this wrist hand injury, whatever they want to call it. And earlier this week in practice, it was kind of heavily taped, and that was caught by a couple of reporters at the practice as well. So I don't think it's really nothing, but at the same time, like you said, it was weird that he played a few snaps early in the game and then he played a few snaps late in the game, whereas it's like, why couldn't they find more for him? Like, was his hand actually really hurting, or what's the situation there? Or are they trying, like you said, trying to give more reps elsewhere, or whatever the case is? But I feel like the last couple of weeks, especially since the bye week, he's been heading in the right direction. But now, if this kind of sets him back a little bit, it'll be interesting to see if Jalyx Hunt kind of overtakes his role. And that obviously wouldn't look the greatest considering how much the Eagles are paying him. But at the same time, Vic Fangio, he said it to start the year that he doesn't care how much guys are getting paid. If they're getting outplayed by somebody else, then that person's going to get the snap. So we'll see how it goes moving forward. But I think Huff has played, like I said, relatively well in recent weeks, but it's still not to the standard that many of us expected.
Which is ultimately, it's a little bit disappointing, but as you say, if you've got enough players that are playing as they need to be, then, fine, we'll actually take that. But when it comes to deals, we at least have to mention this. Hopefully it's not one of those at the end of the season. We could try to be somewhat patient with Bryce Huff, but at the end of the season, hopefully it's not one you're looking at going, man, you paid all this money, you didn't really get much production, you still didn't really ever see him, trend upwards continually. It was kind of an up and down performance. you look at a trade like a Jahan Dotson that the Eagles made and played better, maybe got something out of it. And a fantastic, ridiculous catch from Dotson in the game against Jacksonville. Hopefully we see that continue. He doubled his, actually I think more than doubled his receiving yard total for the year off of that one catch. But up until that point, and even still some, at this point, I've had some comments and seeing people make that, but oh man, Jahan Dotson, not the best trade, not the best move from Howie. You give away a 3rd round pick for that. Obviously the swap with a 5th and every bit still, you give away a 3rd round pick. Granted, then you see Washington take that selection and in a roundabout way with other, compensation or other picks, but get Marshon Lattimore from the New Orleans Saints. And so now you're like, okay, well, we not only traded away to that, but now we're going to face Marshon Lattimore against a team in the division. What were your thoughts? Because again, going back just to, obviously the news from the trade deadline, but a bigger acquisition, one of the bigger names that did take place over the trade deadline, but Marshon Lattimore, Washington kind of trying to bolster that secondary and his potential impact there.
I mean, people want to downplay it because obviously it's a divisional rival making the move, but Marshon Lattimore is a former All-Pro, Pro Bowl cornerback. So, I mean, you can't really deny that it's a good acquisition, especially for the cost. I mean, like you said, the Eagles traded similar compensation for Jahan Dotson, who really hasn't done much this season. Granted, he's stuck behind 2 of the best receivers in the league and a good tight end that's proven as well. So there's not a ton of targets to go his way, but the Eagles kind of knew they were making that move as well because Dotson has another year on his contract as well. So that's why you've seen a guy like Jonathan Mingo get traded for a 4th round pick from the Cowboys or whatever, where people were shocked by that as well. But these young players that have multiple years of team control left on their rookie contracts are always going to be more valuable on the trade market. But as far as Marshon Lattimore goes, it feels like the Commanders' defense, especially their secondary, was one of their biggest weak points this season. And now you've kind of added one of the maybe top 10, top 15 cornerbacks in the NFL. And I mean, he's still battling a hamstring injury. He's not expected to play this week. But if he is going to make his debut against the Eagles, then they're going to have to deal with him because he's had success against the Eagles since A.J. Brown arrived in 2022 in 2 matchups between the Eagles and Saints. He's only allowed 6 receptions on 10 targets for 58 yards, and he also has an interception. So he's kind of held his own against the Eagles whenever they've played, and it's certainly a boost for the Commanders, which the Eagles should be worried about.
You're right. It could be, and some people say, okay, it's not necessarily. No one's going out there and being like, okay, is he for sure going to be at Pro Bowl level? Maybe, maybe not. But it's still reinforcements to a position that they needed some help in, and he has, as you pointed out, and in I think a couple articles as well, and some tweets. But the impact that he's had against A.J. Brown, as you're saying, against A.J. Brown, against Devontae Smith, the familiarity there, the physicality, it's going to be a big game. And so we'll see, because it's a shortened week. The fact that he's out with a hamstring this week, it could be a little bit more difficult for him to play against the Eagles. Yet at the same time, you would take the stance or approach of going, yeah, but it's a division rival. So, he's probably going to, not that he wouldn't necessarily, but probably going to give everything that he can to potentially play in that game. So we will be at that, obviously, as I think a lot of people know by now. But it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that one. Thursday night football matchup. I think that, 3 or 4 weeks ago, everyone was already looking at that saying, man, that's going to be a big game. I don't know that we necessarily assumed or thought it was going to be as big as it is now. We're about to get to Dallas, so I don't want to completely overlook them. But all things considered, looking at the NFC East, it's a 2-horse race. And if both teams, I guess regardless, even if Philly takes care of business, Washington could slip up. But it's looking like that game on Thursday night is going to be setting the tone to say, all right, who's going to take the lead in the NFC East, which is, kudos to Washington. They've been playing really well, but it's crazy to see the magnitude of that game, what it means.
It's going to be a huge matchup. And I mean, for a game in week 11, you would never expect it to have this much meaning, but the way that both these teams are playing to start the year, I mean, people thought the Commanders would take a step forward, but not this much, where they're leading the NFC East and potentially pushing for the number 1 seed overall in the conference. They're playing really, really well. And I mean, and it's in spite of a relatively poor defense. It's just their offense looks unbelievable with Jaden Daniels kind of running the show. And the Eagles really haven't had to deal with kind of a dual threat quarterback of his caliber yet. So granted, they're going to be playing Lamar Jackson later in the season. So they'll end up having to face 2 of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the NFL when it's all said and done. But I said it in an article because somebody asked me about the Eagles' potential to win the division now, given Washington's hot start. And I said that the Eagles might have to sweep their 2 games against the Commanders to have a chance, because outside of those two matchups, the Eagles face some tougher teams in terms of the Ravens and the Steelers still on their schedule, whereas the Commanders only really have the Steelers, and then besides that, their schedule is relatively light outside of the division. So the Eagles have to take advantage of this schedule because, of these two matchups, because playing the teams like the Ravens and the Steelers and the Rams, who look like they're on fire now that they're getting healthy as well. So the Eagles kind of have a more difficult path this second half of the year, and I just can't wait for that Thursday night showdown between these two teams.
It's going to be incredible. But as you also say, kind of, referencing in that line of thinking, it's the NFL. You don't ever overlook any opponent. You can't take anything for granted. It's Dallas week. It's in Dallas. It's a place that Philly has not won since 2017. I think everybody understands that. They know it, the magnitude of the game. You don't have to say much whenever you're playing the Cowboys, even with Dak Prescott on IR with a hamstring injury, CeeDee Lamb not 100%, but he will play. Shoulder injury. Micah Parsons questionable, probably will play based on local inside reporters, but questionable officially with the ankle injury. You've got, I believe that you also had Trayvon Diggs, who was questionable, but maybe play, calf injury, illness, and Zach Martin, who didn't even practice at all, but he's a full go. He should play. So banged up several different areas for Dallas. I asked this question on the live stream, but I'm curious to get your thoughts as well to start this off, and then other matchups to go along with it. But is there any main concern you have because it'll probably take a little bit more, though the line, I believe, is like 7.5 point favorites. So yes, Philly is certainly favored in this one with all the injuries. But what's the biggest thing that could, I don't know, knock the Phillies off, or not knock Philly off in momentum, or I guess even lose the game, but just kind of make this thing a lot more difficult than it should be?
It sounds tacky, but I think you have to be worried about the team being overconfident and too cocky going into the matchup, because we saw last season how the Eagles were expected to win a lot of those games down the final stretch, and they ended up not being able to pull it off. And Cooper Rush, he's obviously a backup quarterback for a reason, but back in 2022 when Dak Prescott went down, he went 4-0 before playing the Eagles, and then he kind of came back to reality. He threw 3 interceptions against the Eagles, and then since then he hasn't been the same quarterback. But at the same time, you have to think from the Cowboys standpoint, where it's just like it's Mike McCarthy versus Kellen Moore and Cooper Rush versus former offensive coordinator, where there might be some type of dynamic there where they're going to be trying a little bit harder, pulling out all their plays in the playbook and trying to pull off the upset. It's the NFL. Nobody's just going to lay down. So, the line, like you said, is Eagles minus 7.5 or whatever it is. But these divisional games are always tricky. And then when there's these personal rivalries or whatever else going on, that can always factor in as well. So, they should win. They should win convincingly. But like you said, the Cowboys are getting Micah Parsons back. They are missing, obviously, a couple of huge players as well. No Deron Bland, no Dak Prescott. You mentioned Trayvon Diggs didn't practice, but he still should be playing. Tyler Guyton's banged up, Zach Martin's banged up, so the Eagles should win convincingly. But like I said, there's nothing given in the NFL, so we'll see what happens.
I'm hearing some cautious optimism in the thought process. It should be taking care of business. But, we've seen this before. Maybe there's PTSD from last season. We've seen more recently that the Eagles have taken care of business. Jacksonville was just it's like, man, the most dominating game, and yet it comes down to the wire there. Some poor decision-making. We don't have to go down that full rabbit hole, but it's like just the whole feel of it is like, man, you have this absolutely wrapped up, and then in a matter of 14 seconds off the game clock, got so close.
That botched fumble call that wasn't a fumble.
Exactly.
Screwed everything up. That
so
made
if
it
the
closer
NFL,
than it needed to be. So.
If the NFL needs to or wants to make this game closer based on betting trends, then we're just not saying that there's anything rigged necessarily, but we're just throwing that one out there. We could get a closer one, but for a team that is all in, not really making a whole lot of moves and doing some crazy stuff, this does feel like a great opportunity. And you mentioned the 3 interceptions from Cooper Rush. We've said it but Cooper Dejean and or Quinyon Mitchell, maybe we get one. Or heck, if the linebackers are the best coverage players on the team, that's a little tongue-in-cheek. Relax, I'm going to get a comment about that, I'm sure. But as good as they play, it does feel like, look, take care of business. The Cowboys have a lot of areas to exploit, maybe a couple turnovers, and then just, as you said, don't be overconfident. But having said that, where are the couple areas to exploit for the Eagles? Go in here, take care of business. What can they do?
Well, the running game on both sides of the ball is just disastrous for the Cowboys. They allow they have the second worst rushing offense. They only have 82 yards of rushing offense per game. So they're basically the complete opposite of the Eagles in that regard. And then they're also allowing the third most rushing yards per game. They allow 147.8 rushing yards per game. So on the ground game in both, like I said, on both sides of the ball is where you could take advantage of them. And then also their offensive line as a whole, we've kind of become accustomed to the Cowboys having this dominant, fearsome offensive line. And that just hasn't been the case this season. I mean, even Zach Martin, who's become, he feels like he's a first-team All-Pro every season. He's already allowed a bunch of pressures, 19 total pressures, and 3 sacks in 2024. And in his entire career, every season of his career, the most total pressures he's ever allowed in a single season was 24. So he's already on pace to just way go past that mark. So it just seems like it just seems like even the most reliable player on the Cowboys offensive line is struggling this season. So if the Eagles defense can't keep it up, I would be shocked. I feel like this is the team that they should be able to take advantage of on both sides of the ball, and don't get too caught up in we have to blow them out and it has to be 40-0 because they're playing Cooper Rush at quarterback. Just win, and if they can win convincingly, that'd be great, but just win and move on in the division because that's what they have to do to keep pace with the Commanders right now.
It's also kind of you talking about the rushing attack. It's why I'm taking Saquon Barkley over 87.5 rushing yards because it feels like, that the averages are there. You're going to run the football. You should run the football. That's a weakness of Dallas. Force them to basically stand up and say, yes, we can stop the run, and they should not be able to. So that one feels pretty confident on. And then if this thing turns into a blowout, hey, look, we might see a Will Shipley appearance. He got a touchdown that was called back on a hold, but it's a hope, it's a potential that we could see. But I'm with you as far as just the rushing attack in general. Like just it is everyone go back and watch and see tons of different highlights of other teams and scores that they put up on them. But it's like they have the interior of the D-line, especially. I mean, good luck. And the way that the Eagles have started to finally, over the last, 2 or 3 games, not just inside zone 93% of the time, but some outside zone, pin pull, different usage with the run game and the blocking too, because Lane Johnson said that they talked about coming out, off the bye week and basically saying like, hey, we're good. You could lean on the offensive line. Like Jordan Mailata saying the same thing. We're good too. You could use us a little bit more if you want to. And we're seeing the difference that's made on this team. So don't get cute with it. As you said, also, don't be overconfident. You did reference a little bit with Micah Parsons, but anything else a little bit more nuanced as far as areas maybe Dallas could exploit, could take advantage of, what might, again, just matchup specific, make this game closer, as I said, closer than it needs to be?
Well, I feel like CeeDee Lamb obviously can be a game wrecker. So you kind of have CeeDee Lamb on offense and then Micah Parsons on defense. If you can kind of keep those guys in check and kind of make them like non-factors in a way, then that's how you can kind of run away with this game. But if the Cowboys kind of want to take that Tampa Bay Buccaneers approach of just death by a million paper cuts that we kind of saw the Bengals use on that first drive last week, then that's where the week before, then that's like the area that I would be concerned, where they just kind of get Cooper Rush going that way, where it's just short plays, feeding these guys 5 to 10 yard passes and allowing them to make plays after the catch. But the Eagles have been better in that regard in terms of tackling and limiting yards after the catch since the bye week. So, like I said, overall, I think the Eagles should win this game rather convincingly, but they just can't get too ahead of themselves and just take it a play at a time.
Okay, I like it. I did ask everyone too in this video, so I'll ask you as well. If you had to pick a first-time touchdown scorer in the game, and it could be Dallas, I'll allow it. You probably shouldn't unless you want to get crucified in the comments, but you can. But if you were to pick a first-time touchdown scorer in this game, who would it be and why would you go with that person?
I'm going to go a little bit maybe out of the ordinary, but I'll go Dallas Goedert here. I feel like Dallas Goedert making his return in Dallas, he hasn't really had much usage outside of that New Orleans game where he went off, and now his first game back, I think maybe they kind of march to the red zone, and instead of kind of just rushing with Barkley or Jalen Hurts, they kind of maybe run a play action and get Dallas Goedert a touchdown in Dallas.
Love it. It'd be nice to have a tight end touchdown to Goddard for, I guess the Saints one, which wasn't a touchdown, but like a big play. But touchdown-wise, why not? If it's Dallas, you might as well. So I was considering Dallas Goedert as well. Now that you said DG,
sorry.
No, it's absolutely it's fair. I shouldn't go as far as saying like a Jahan Dotson or something like that. That'd be way too far. But I feel like you could potentially. People are maybe going to hate me for saying this too, but you could potentially see a Kenny Gainwell vulturing a touchdown. People don't like that, but
you just got everybody with Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts in their fantasy team upset.
I know, they're going to be like, what the heck? That's probably not a good bet. I do like the Will Shipley anytime, but for first time, it feels like a given. But
you might listen. It's Kellen Moore's first game back in Dallas. Maybe you see like something crazy where he gets a Lane Johnson receiving touchdown or something like that.
Gosh, could you imagine?
Or
that would actually
Ben VanSumeren touchdown.
That would
crazy.
be pretty legit. Yeah, if actually, I'll take that back. If Ben VanSumeren is healthy, he's the concussion protocol, he's questionable. If Ben VanSumeren is here, we're going to get a fullback dive touchdown from Ben VanSumeren. Old school football, run it right up the middle. Who doesn't like that?
Like it's Madden 2002.
Yeah. If anytime you need the automatic yard, just run fullback dive. There you go. Automatic. Okay, score predictions though. Other talking about predictions, but where are we going to go with? How confident? I know it's a game they should win, but putting it time for the official prediction. Where are you going with?
Well, I picked the Eagles to win last week, and they actually won. So we can kind of end that curse that I had going.
Yep.
I'm going to go with the Eagles win again. Obviously, I've been talking like they're going to blow them out, but I think it might be a little bit closer. I mean, I think they'll still cover the line, but I'll have it Eagles 30, Cowboys 20.
Okay, 10-point game. That's fair. They cover at least. I want it to be personally like obviously everybody's like, just blow them out. Just, no mercy in Dallas. Who cares, right? Like, just obliterate. Just, yeah. But I've kind of gone back and forth. I'm going to say, like a 28 to 13. That's what I'm going to finally officially go with here. I've gone back and forth on a bunch of different numbers. I would say 28 to 13. Feels like it'd be solid there.
That's fair. I mean, and my prediction, I say 30-20, but I'm thinking maybe they'll be up like 30-13, and the Cowboys kind of get a late like garbage time touchdown to make it look a little bit closer than it was. But yeah, I think I can see that. A pretty comfortable win for the Eagles.
That's how Dallas usually scores too. They get a lot of those, late garbage touchdowns that.
Wow. Dak Prescott shade. Everybody's going to love that.
I mean, there's some legitimacy to it because we see some of those games where they're like absolutely blown out, and then all of a sudden, like, oh well, hey, it's a little bit closer, but it really wasn't. It didn't matter. So I don't know. We'll see. But everyone else, let us know your predictions, your score predictions in the comments. Let us know also thoughts in general. What's going to keep the Eagles back? If there's any concern there, what should they capitalize on? Everything else, we appreciate it. And of course, as always, make sure to go follow Anthony DeBona, the man himself, for gutting it out. Hit the like button for Anthony because he is injured, sick, but nothing's keeping him out of this. He's I
got my Bluey teacup. I'm pulling through here for you guys.
There you go. You made it. But no, man, I appreciate it. It's a blast as always. So for making time and everything else. No hope you get to feeling better and everybody else the same thing.
I gotta get ready for next week, baby. I'm ready.
As honest as we were saying right before this, it's probably the best time. I was a couple of days ago starting to get a little better now, and maybe it's. I guess, get healthy, recoup, ready for Thursday night football, but we'll be there. So that'll be a blast.
Yes. We'll be activated off IR and ready to go for Thursday night.
There you go. Yes. All right. Well, we appreciate it, guys. Make sure to like, subscribe. More giveaways to come too. We'll see if the individual claims the Saquon Barkley helmet. Otherwise, we're going to have to give that away to the live stream. But y'all know what it is. We'll catch you on the live stream, and go Birds.